When Netflix came around, and with it crime documentaries like Dahmer and the Ted Bundy tapes, we all got to know the true hideous nature of their crimes. But we live in a cruel world, and about some serial killers, there isn't so much information for us to dive into. Nevertheless, their crimes were still extremely violent in nature. Let's take a look at some lesser-known serial killers. Who were their victims, and what drove them to committing not one murder, but multiple? An example of one of these unknown serial killers is Israel Keyes, an American serial killer who is not as widely known as some others. Keyes was a meticulous planner and took steps to avoid detection by law enforcement. He committed murders across the United States over a 14-year period, but he was not apprehended until 2012. Keyes was known for his versatility in selecting victims and his ability to blend into different communities. He did not have a specific type of victim and would choose people based on their vulnerability and the ease with which he could isolate them. He also took steps to avoid leaving forensic evidence at his crime scenes, such as disposing of bodies in remote locations and cleaning up after himself. Keyes committed suicide while in custody in 2012, so the full extent of his crimes may never be known. However, it is believed that he may have been responsible for more murders than the 8 he admitted to before his death. Israel Keyes committed a series of murders over a 14-year period between 2001 and 2012. He was known for his careful planning and the ability to avoid detection by law enforcement. Here are some of the known details about the murders he committed. Samantha Koenig. In February 2012, Keyes abducted 18-year-old Samantha Koenig from the coffee stand where she worked in Anchorage, Alaska. He later raped and strangled her before dismembering her body and disposing of it in a frozen lake. He was eventually caught after using Koenig's debit card to withdraw money. Bill and Lorraine Currier. In June 2011, Keyes abducted and murdered a couple from Essex, Vermont, named Bill and Lorraine Currier. Their bodies were never found, and Keyes did not provide any details about where he disposed of them. Anchorage murders. Keyes is also believed to have committed a series of murders in Anchorage, Alaska, between 2005 and 2007. He admitted to killing at least 4 people during that time, but did not provide any further details. Others. Keyes also indicated that he committed murders in other parts of the United States, including Washington State, Oregon, and New York. However, the full extent of his crimes is unknown, as he took many details to his grave when he committed suicide in jail in 2012. It's important to note that these are just some of the known details about Israel Keyes' crimes, and there may be more victims who have not been identified. Another lesser-known serial killer is Robert Hansen, also known as the Butcher Baker. Hansen was an American serial killer who operated in Alaska during the 1970s and early 1980s. He is believed to have murdered at least 17 women, many of whom were young and vulnerable. Hansen would typically abduct his victims and take them to his remote cabin in the Alaskan wilderness, where he would rape and torture them before killing them. He was known for hunting his victims like prey, often releasing them in the wilderness and then tracking them down with a hunting rifle. Hansen's crimes went undetected for several years, in part because he targeted women who were marginalized and had few resources to seek help. However, he was eventually caught in 1983 after one of his intended victims managed to escape and alert the police. Hansen was sentenced to life in prison for his crimes and died in 2014 while still in custody. His case has been the subject of several books and movies, including the 2013 film The Frozen Ground starring Nicolas Cage and John Cusack. Hansen, aka the Butcher Baker, is believed to have murdered at least 17 women during his killing spree in the 1970s and early 1980s in Alaska. His victims were typically young women, many of whom were marginalized or working as prostitutes. Here are some of the known details about Hansen's crimes. Joanna Messina. One of Hansen's earliest known victims was Joanna Messina, a 24-year-old who disappeared in 1971. Her body was found in a gravel pit outside of Anchorage in 1983, after Hansen's arrest. Sherry Morrow. Sherry Morrow a 23-year-old dancer and waitress, disappeared in 1981. Her remains were found near the Knik River in 1984 after Hansen's arrest. Paula Goulding, a 17-year-old runaway, disappeared in 1983. Her remains were found near Eklutna Road in 1984 after Hansen's arrest. Others. In addition to the above victims, Hansen is believed to have killed at least 13 other women, many of whom remain unidentified. He would typically abduct his victims and take them to his remote cabin in the Alaskan wilderness, where he would rape and torture them before killing them. He also confessed to kidnapping and raping several other women, but claimed that he did not kill them. Hansen was eventually convicted of 4 murders, including those of Paula Goulding, Joanna Messina, Sherry Morrow, and an unidentified woman known only as Eklutna Annie. He was sentenced to life in prison without parole and died in custody in 2014. Cindy Paulson. In June 1983, Cindy Paulson, a 17-year-old prostitute, managed to escape from Hansen after he abducted her and held her captive at his remote cabin. She ran down a nearby road and flagged down a passing car, which took her to the police. Hansen was eventually arrested and charged with kidnapping and assault. The third killer is Joachim Kroll, also known as the Ruhr Cannibal. Kroll was a German serial killer who operated between 1955 and 1976. He is believed to have murdered at least 14 people, most of whom were young girls or women. Kroll's crimes went undetected for many years in part because he targeted marginalized victims who were unlikely to be missed. He would typically lure his victims to his apartment, where he would strangle them before engaging in acts of necrophilia and cannibalism. Kroll was eventually caught in 1976 after a neighbor reported a clogged drain in his apartment building. When the plumber investigated the problem, he discovered human flesh in the pipes. Kroll was arrested and confessed to killing and eating several victims. Here are some of the known details about Kroll's crimes. Manuela Knott. Manuela Knott was a 4-year-old girl who disappeared in 1962. Kroll abducted her, strangled her, and dismembered her body. He later claimed to have eaten some of her remains. Petra Gies. Petra Gies was a 13-year-old girl who disappeared in 1975. Kroll abducted her, strangled her, and engaged in acts of necrophilia with her body. Ursula Rolling. Ursula Rolling was a 24-year-old woman who disappeared in 1976. Kroll abducted her, strangled her, and engaged in acts of necrophilia and cannibalism with her body. Others. In addition to the above victims, Kroll is believed to have killed at least 11 other people, most of whom were young girls or women. He was convicted of 8 murders in 1982 and sentenced to life in prison, where he died in 1991. Do you want to learn more about crime? Subscribe to Crime Channel for more. Don't forget to like this video.